Welcome everybody to the Comparative Literature course. This is Dr. Hanan Halabi from the International Arabic Academy. So today's topics are going to be the following. We're going to start with an introduction. Then we're going to talk about what is comparative literature, what are the skills learned by students and related to comparative literature, an overview, early work, French school, German school, American school, and we're going to discuss the current developments in comparative literature. So as an introduction, we would say that comparative literature is an academic field dealing with the study of literature and cultural expression across linguistic, national, geographic, and disciplinary boundaries. So comparative literature performs a role similar to that of the study of international relations, but works with languages and artistic traditions. So, as to understand cultures from the inside. While more frequently practiced with works of different languages, comparative literature may also be performed on works of the same language if the works originated from different nations or cultures which that language is spoken. The characteristically intercultural and transnational field of comparative literature concerns itself with the relation between literature broadly defined and other spheres of a human activity. We're talking about history, politics, philosophy, art, and science. Well, unlike other forms of literary study, comparative literature places its emphasis on the interdisciplinary analysis of social and cultural production within the economy, political dynamics, cultural movements, historical shifts, religious differences, the urban environment, international relations, public policy, and sciences. So, as we can see, comparative studies includes a lot of sciences together, while criticism of the field quickly developed as scholars realized that a more precise description of the field would have been the comparative study of literature, and therefore comparative literature was a bit of a sloppy term. Another issue was raised concerning the Eurocentrism of the field. Despite these issues, the field and the term and the Eurocentrism of the term, so despite these issues, the field have stuck around for over a century. And today's comparative literature curricula tend to emphasize the complexity of the discipline. In fact, contemporary comparative literature is more transdisciplinary, spanning other areas such as critical race theory and queer studies. So comparative literature students often read across genres and media: fiction, poetry, nonfiction, graphic novel, film, TV, even graffiti. The point is to analyze the cultural narratives and stories being conveyed throughout history by different cultures. It's also to determine how translation plays into the way these narratives are received, because translation also plays a role in changing how things go, how these pieces of literature are narrated. That's why we have to take into consideration. So what is comparative literature? As we said, comparative literature is an interdisciplinary field. That means a lot of, or an intersection of fields of study that focuses on the literature and literary traditions of different countries, languages, and cultures. It involves the critical analysis and comparisons of literary works from various regions and time periods, aiming to explore the similarities and differences in themes, styles, cultural contexts, and literary techniques. So as you can see, the field of comparative literature originated in the late 18th century, and it gained prominence in the 19th and 20th centuries. It emerged as a response to the increasing globalization and interconnectedness of cultures and languages. So as you can see, there is a connection between the culture and the language that belongs to that culture. So comparative literature scholars often examine how literary texts are influenced by many factors such as social, historical, and political factors, as well as how they shape and reflect cultural identities. So again, when we're talking about comparative literature, we have to say that it goes beyond the study of a single national or linguistic tradition, because it involves the study of literature across borders, often involving translations and multilingual approaches. Scholars in this field may analyze works from different periods, genres, and forms, including novels, poetry, drama, and essays. So, the goals actually of comparative literature include fostering cross-cultural understanding, exploring the universality and diversity of human experiences, and illuminating the interconnectedness of literary traditions. It allows for a broader understanding of literature and provides sights or insights into the ways in which literature interacts with other art forms, intellectual movements, and historical events. So, comparative literature is often closely related to other disciplines such as cultural studies, translation studies, post-colonial studies, and literary theory. Scholars in comparative literature draw on a range of theoretical approaches and methodologies to conduct their research, including close reading, textual analysis, historical and contextual analysis, and theoretical frameworks such as feminism, post-structuralism, and postmodernism. Overall, comparative literature provides a framework for exploring the rich tapestry of literary expressions across cultures, languages, and historical periods, in this case, offering new perspectives and insights into the nature of literature and its role in society. So what are the skills learned by students of comparative literature? When students learn comparative literature, they aren't learning just linguistics and literacy. On the contrary, they are learning analytical reading, writing, and advanced research skills. They use their critical thinking, they use their analytical skills, their analysis in order to read and write and to produce pieces of writing. And also it helps with their research skills. It also helps them build strong skills in at least one language other than English, since we said that comparative literature, or it includes actually different literatures, different cultures. That's why students start learning how to compare, or at least more about other languages other than the English or Arabic language. It also helps with the ability to think critically in multiple languages. So here, this is a kind of a skill, a thinking skill that is transferable from one language to another. Students or those who learn comparative literacy, they use their critical thinking in one language, they use it in the other language, and they use it with all the languages that they learn. It also helps with the vision to develop new frameworks In addition to that, it adds deep appreciation for language, for literature, and for culture. And this is highly important so that they appreciate what they are learning, appreciate the language that they are learning, appreciate the structure of language, appreciate the literature and the culture that they are learning about. It also adds to the curiosity of students, to their passion and to their creativity, because after all, they are learning about different languages. They are trying to connect things with each other. That's why we talked about connectedness. They are trying to create new pieces of writing. They are able to read, to practice different skills, especially different thinking and analytical skills. So working between, within, and across borders, comparative literature allows students to build facility with multiple languages. That's why it is interdisciplinary, and skills in critical thinking, in viewing, in writing, and oral presentation. So comparatists, those who study comparative literature, also apply the insights and methods of translation studies, philosophy, history, linguistics, sociology, and other human sciences to the study of literature and media. Now we're going to start with the overview of comparative literature. So students and instructors in the field, usually called comparatists, have traditionally been proficient in several languages, and they are acquainted and they got used to the literary traditions, literary criticism, and major literary texts of those languages. So many of the newer subfields, however, are more influenced by critical theory and literary theory, stressing theoretical acumen and the ability to consider different types of art concurrently over proficiency in multiple languages. So, as you can see, the interdisciplinary nature of the field means that the comparatists typically exhibit acquaintance with different sciences, including sociology, history, anthropology, translation studies, critical theory, cultural studies, and religious studies. So as a result, comparative literature programs within universities may be designed by scholars drawn from several such departments. So the eclecticism has led critics from within and without to charge that comparative literature is insufficiently well defined, or that comparatists are too easily fall into dilettantism because the scope of their work is of necessity very broad. So, comparative literature is an interdisciplinary field whose practitioners, we're talking here about comparatists, study literature across national borders, time periods, languages, as we said before, genres, boundaries between literature and the other arts like music, painting, dance, filming, and other stuff. And across disciplines like literature and psychology, philosophy, science, history, sociology, politics, etc. So defined most broadly, comparative literature is the study of literature without borders. Scholarships in comparative literature includes, for example, studying literacy and social status in the Americas, medieval epic and romance, It might also include the links of literature to folklore and mythology, colonial and post-colonial writings in different parts of the world, and asking fundamental questions about the definition of literature itself. So what scholars in comparative literature share is a desire to study literature beyond national boundaries and an interest in languages so they can read foreign texts in their original form. So many comparatists also share the desire to integrate literary experience with other cultural phenomena such as historical change, philosophical concepts, and social movements. Now we come to talk about the early work. So work considered foundational to the discipline of comparative literature includes Spanish humanist Juan Andres' work, Transylvanian Hungarian Hugo Meltzel, de Le Monte's scholarship, also the founding editor of the journal Acta Comparatinos, which is founded at 1877, and an Irish scholar, Postnet's comparative literature in 1886. However, antecedents can be found in the ideas of John Wolfgang von Goethe and his vision of world literature, and Russian formalists credited Alexander Vyslovsky with laying the groundwork for the discipline. Victor Zermonsky, for instance, referred to Vyslovsky as the most remarkable representative of comparative literary study in Russian and European scholarships of the 19th century. During the late 19th century, comparatists such as Fyodor Oslev were chiefly concerned with deducing the purported zeitgeist or spirit of the times, which they assumed to be embodied in the literary output of each nation. Although many comparative works from this period would be judged chauvinistic, Eurocentric, or even racist by present-day standards, the intention of most scholars during this period was to increase the understanding of other cultures, not to assert superiority over them. Although politicians and others from outside the field sometimes use their works for this purpose. Now we start talking about the French school. So from the early part of the 20th century until World War II, the field was characterized by a notably empiricist and positivist approach, termed the French school, in which scholars like Paul van Tigam examined works forensically, looking for evidence of origins and influences between works from different nations, often termed rapport de fait. Thus, a scholar might attempt to trace how a particular literary idea or motive traveled between nations over time. In the French School of Comparative Literature, the study of influences and mentalities dominates. Today, the French school practices the nation-state approach of the discipline, although it also promotes the approach of European comparative literature. Now we come to talk about the German school. Like the French school, German comparative literature has its origin in the late 19th century. After World War II, the discipline developed to a large extent owing to one scholar in particular, Peter Sonti, 1929-1971. He was a Hungarian who taught at the Free University of Berlin. Zondi's work in Algerine, or what we call general and comparative literary studies, included the genre of drama, lyric poetry, and hermeneutics. Zondi's vision of comparative literature became evident in both his policy of inviting international guest speakers to Berlin and his introductions to their topic. So he welcomed, among others, Jacques Derrida, before he attained worldwide recognition, Pierre Bourdieu, Lucien Goldman from France, Paul Gutmann from Zurich, Gershom Scholem from Jerusalem, Theodore W. Adorno from Frankfurt, Hans Robert Joseph from the Young University of Constance, and from the US, Renee Willick, Geoffrey Hartman, and Peter Demetres, all at Yale, along with the liberal publicist Lionel Trilling. So the names of these visiting scholars who form a programmatic network and a methodological canon epitomize on this conception of comparative literature. However, German comparatists working in East Germany were not invited, nor were recognized colleagues from France or the Netherlands. Yet, while he was oriented towards the West and the new allies of West Germany, and paid little attention to comparatists in Eastern Europe, his conception of a transnational and transatlantic comparative literature was very much influenced by East European literary theorists of the Russian and Prague schools of structuralism, from whose works René Wellick, too, derived many of his concepts. These concepts continue to have profound implications for comparative literary theory today. Now we come to the American or US school. So reacting to the French school, post-war scholars, collectively termed the American school, sought to return the field to matters more directly concerned with literary criticism, de-emphasizing the detective work and detailed historical search that the French school had demanded. So the American school was more closely aligned with the original internationalist vision of Goethe and Posnet, arguably reflecting the post-war desire for international cooperation, looking for examples of universal human truth based on the literary archetypes that appeared throughout literatures from all times and places. Prior to the advent of the American school, the scope of comparative literature in the West was typically limited to the literatures of West Europe and Anglo-America. Predominantly literature in English, German, and French literature, with occasional forays into Italian literature, primarily for Dante, and Spanish literature for Miguel de Cervantes. One monument to the approach of this period is Eric Orbach's book, Mimesis, the representation of reality in Western literature. A survey of techniques of realism in texts whose origins span several continents and 3,000 years. The approach of the American school would be familiar to current practitioners of cultural studies and is even claimed by some to be the forerunners of the cultural studies boom in universities during the 1970s and 1870s. So the field today is highly diverse. For example, Comparatists routinely study Chinese literature, Arabic literature, and the literatures of most other major world languages and regions, as well as English and continental European literatures. Now we talk about the current development. So there is a movement among comparativists in the United States and elsewhere to refocus the discipline away from the nation-based approach with which it has previously been associated towards a cross-cultural approach that pays no heed to national borders. Works of this nature include Alamgir Hashmi's The Commonwealth, Comparative Literature in the World, Gayatri Chakravorty, Spivak's Death of a Despot, David Damrosch, What is World Literature, Stephen Potosi, The Zeptenics Concept of Comparative Cultural Studies, and Pascal Casanova's The World Republic of Letters. It remains to be seen whether this approach will prove successful given the comparative literature had its roots in nation-based thinking, and much of the literature under study still concerns issues of the nation-state. Given developments in the studies of globalization and interculturalism, comparative literature are they representing a wider study than the single language nation-state approach, may be well suited to move away from the paradigm of the nation-state. Joseph Hankinson's stress on comparisons, affiliative potential is one recent effort in this direction. While the best comparative literature is experiencing institutional constriction, there are signs that in many parts of the world, the discipline is thriving, especially in Asia, Latin America, the Caribbean, and the Mediterranean. So, as an end, current trends in translational studies also reflect the growing importance of post-colonial literary figures such as Coetzee, Condé, Lovelace, Naipaul, Ondaatje, Soyinka, Walcott, and Seiko. Thank you for listening. We will be meeting you in the second part of the course.